Hi teachers, it's Amanda, and today is video 6 in our series of close reading supplemental texts. And this is video 6 out of 6 in the series. So if you are here now and this is the first one you've watched, be sure to go back to the beginning and catch every single one in this series. My goal for you in this series was to present not just materials and ideas to you arbitrarily, but to present a new way of approaching your unit design, a new way of thinking about depth while still honoring breadth. And just kind of giving you new ways to explore that as an educator. We are in a world where texts and books are being censored and banned, and it's just the most heartbreaking time to be alive as an English teacher. And I have found that one of the most powerful ways to fight back is playing the game, but changing the rules. And that's what I do professionally. No, in all honesty, can I talk today? This has been a lot of videos. I really want us to think about when we're teaching the units we've either been mandated, handed, approved. This was my teaching experience. I never in my life got to pick a book, pick a unit, or do whatever I wanted. I mean, I had a couple of moments of flexibility with some of my units, but for the most part, I've always worked at schools. I worked at 2 schools, and at both places, the curriculum was something that was aligned horizontally, is sort of aligned vertically, and it was what we all did. And we were, in some cases, pretty lockstep. In other cases, we were district mandated to be at a certain place at a certain time, and that was just the reality. For those of you who are in this situation, I empathize. For those of you who are not, this also is still a brilliant way to approach your curriculum, and you just have more flexibility, but utilizing texts that are outside the canon, that are outside the realm of what a traditional novel unit has, is a beautiful first step in the right direction of including other authors, including other genres, including other voices into a mainstream conversation with students. When excerpts are used alongside the longer text that's been approved, it's sad because we haven't been able to give like the full time and range of the text that it probably deserves. However, we are also doing something really important, and that is saying that this text we're doing, right, this bigger text we're doing does not exist in isolation. It is just one example of the American dream. It is just one example of allegory. It is just one example of how the setting impacts the character's conflict, right? We can kind of remind students that this unit is not only driven by our essential question, it's driven by our ideas and our conversations, but the text is not the only thing that matters. Supplements add the texture and joy and intrigue, perspective and diversity that so many of our units need. And that was really my goal today, was to give you some unexpected ideas, unexpected voices and authors that now can have a very rightful, real, and important place in your curriculum because of what these passages offer and because of what the author's craft tools are that we can now teach and explore in so much more depth than ever before. And so today's novel, we are going to explore probably one of the more challenging things to teach in terms of characterization. So this is our second video about characterization, but we're going to tackle characterization from a totally different angle. If you haven't watched video number 5 in this series, you should probably watch that like after this one so you can see the other angle that I talked about. But one of the things I shared was the acronym STEAL and how I was talking to another teacher that I coach and how we were we're finding like it doesn't really serve the purposes of critical thinking. It kind of enables the labeling culture that we're trying to get rid of. So many students think annotation is, oh, highlight. I found it, we don't want students to feel like they're done once they found something. And so in this exercise, we're going to talk about inner dialogue and how inner dialogue is an author's craft choice that really will impact what we understand about the character, whether it's related to the character's experience within the theme of the story, the conflict of the story, something along those lines. The inner dialogue is something that gives us another layer of complexity that's worth exploring together as a class and worth exploring as students are practicing their analysis and their writing. So today's text that we're going to tackle is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I picked this one for, a lot of reasons, but if you want to look at inner dialogue, this is kind of it. Our protagonist in Turtles All the Way Down, she, very similar to We Are Also Good at Smiling, Amber McBride's novel, our main character is struggling with her mental health. And We Are Also Good at Smiling, clinical depression was a little bit more at the center. In this text, our protagonist is struggling with obsessive compulsive disorder and very, very extreme anxiety issues. And while the OCD might not be quite as universal as the anxiety, being in her head and watching it happen through her brain and the way that the diction and the syntax all work together, that is such an amazing thing to study. And this, of course, right? Like this is something that can pair with any novel where any of our protagonists are having this kind of first person in their mind. I guess it could also be third person omniscient, where the narration is getting deep into the mind of that protagonist and kind of watching the ways in which we're actually hearing a lot more from the inside than from the outside, or the inside is really dictating what happens on the outside and explaining and demonstrating why things on the outside are the way that they are. And so our protagonist, she is in a situation in this scene where she is about to have a first kiss with a boy. And I think most people are anxious at that moment and nervous at that moment. Hers is interesting because the build up to the kiss is not so anxious, but it's the what happens after, and her experience of having that first kiss and then what she starts to think about internally is very, very unique, but also I think for students, so relatable. I can't even tell you how many of your students I think are going to feel seen, are going to feel validated, are going to have a lot to say about this moment. I understand that potentially a scene with two teenagers kissing might be a challenging thing to do with teenagers, but if you have the right environment and support system and relationship with your students and you feel comfortable doing this, I think it is very much not about the kissing. It is about the literary craft that's going on as we see this character struggle with this juxtaposition between the joy and happiness and love that she feels for this person, but the very real evil enemy that is what her mind is doing to her at the same time, that she is so fighting this demon inside of her, and it's really, really challenging. So we're gonna look at the passage together right now, and my homework for you would be to share what are some other great novels where inner monologue, or inner dialogue I should say, is a dominating and impressive piece of the work of how the character develops over time. All right, let's hop in to the passage. So as I was creating this assignment, I really had to think through for myself when it comes to inner dialogue or inner monologues, right? Even just like if we're on stage and a character is doing a monologue, this is something that I think needs to be broken down even further, right? The effect that providing this kind of insight to a character's mind is giving the audience on that character. And so partially, I really started kind of researching other situations where this happens. I think a lot about Hamlet. I think a lot about um, other stage productions in particular. I think that's definitely a place where we get a lot of that inner world of a character in a really unique way. And then also, of course, this novel, I've not read something in the YA realm where the inner conversation is so revelatory in understanding truly this character's experience, especially because this character's mental health is so unstable, and right, and she's so working so hard to fight against it, but also like learn how to love herself and lean into who she really is. So breaking down these highlighting directions was really important, I think, in getting to the bottom of what I want students to be able to conclude, right? I'm not trying to conclude anything for them, but I definitely, just like in all of our other passages, want to make sure that I'm giving them the correct steps to make close guesses and judgments. And I don't want them reaching into thin air, right? We talked about this metaphor of being in a lane line, right? We don't want to throw them into the ocean. We want to throw them into the pool, but like also in a lane line, so that what they're suggesting, what they're concluding is much closer to possible than them just kind of guessing other things. So looking at this passage, I thought that the juxtaposition was really powerful. If juxtaposition is too hard of a word, you might just use the word contrast, right? Because what we're going to see here is that this main character has a lot of feelings that contrast with what her mind is telling her. She's got the back and forth. Kids could also say back and forth. It's okay for them to struggle in labeling or identifying it. Once again, if you want to give them the word juxtaposition, if you want to give them the word contrast or conflict, those are all great words for students to use to describe what's going on here. I also think that the stream of consciousness is powerful in this particular scene and will come up again in other places where you look at characters' inner thoughts. They're not censored, right? They're not clean. The diction, the syntax, all of that reveals kind of the rambling, continuous thoughts that are moving and moving and moving. So speaking of syntax, I'm like, what did I just do? The syntax is also notable by itself, right? So I put them both on here, but you might choose to focus on one rather than the other. Maybe knowing stream of consciousness is not that important, but it is important for kids to notice, hey, like the sentences seem to be really short or they're incomplete. These are all fragments. There are definitely scenes where that syntax, and you'll see it soon, the syntax is reflecting an emotional experience of the character, right? A tone of the passage. Those things are directly connected. So that's really important to have students look for. It's also pretty obvious. So it's nice to have something that they will be able to see quickly, but then you're ready to redirect them with, okay, great, you observed something. So what does it mean? They already know they're going after, right, her characterization and also like, right, her emotional state and how she feels about what's going on. And then there's also like an extended metaphor in this passage. Again, it may or may not be helpful to you to lean on that extended metaphor. So please take or delete whatever instructions here would be helpful to your conversation. I think the more you have, I think the more challenging the discussion, the more challenging the lesson, especially considering the passage itself is not difficult, right? We're using young adult fiction here. We're using relatively easy to read passages. So that gives us the chance to push kids a little bit harder in terms of analysis. So decide what you want. Okay, so I am going to also give a quick caveat that this passage is much longer than I would normally pull for a close reading. Much, much, much longer than normal. But because we have stream of consciousness, because we have this inner dialogue, because there's an extended metaphor, I did try to keep it as true as I could to the text. But just as I have done with other passages, and I talk about in the other close reading trainings, you are allowed to edit and amend these. You do not have to be true to the novel or true to the text if your goal is to use this supplement to teach something about author's craft. You can delete things, you can shorten, you can ellipses, whatever you want. So there's definitely pieces of dialogue that I got rid of, and I only kept what was most important. So we've got our annotation directions. We're going to go ahead and go down so you can see this is much longer than the other ones I have. It's like that first, like a half page. Then we've got 1 full, 2 full, 3 full. So 3.5 pages it's long, but as you can see, a lot of it is dialogue. So, okay. The question we're going to look at today is, how does the author use inner dialogue to reveal the narrator's personality and struggles as she enters into a new relationship with Davis? So in this scene, the character is going to have a first kiss, right? So there is romance here. There is a relationship here. There are feelings, like feelings between two teenage kids who are really into each other. And that is something that is real hard for our main characters. All right, so let's see what John Green is up to here with this inner dialogue situation going on. I want to walk you through a few of the most notable moments that we have in terms of the stream of consciousness, the juxtaposition, and just the experience we've got going on with our character. So there's a lot here, right? I don't want to take our entire video reading through this passage with you because this one is one to kind of slow down with, but I do want to highlight a few moments that are notable to talk about with students. So first and foremost would be this first stream of consciousness experience. It's a really beautiful passage all by itself to study for stream of consciousness. And in this case, you'll see that the stream of consciousness is pretty coherent. The sentences are rambling, they're long, there are quite a few commas. A lot of the sentences start with and, but for the most part, in this moment, our main character is pretty coherent. So she is outside in the backyard with the boy she likes, and they are looking up at the stars and hoping to catch a meteor shower. They don't see it, and they know, they kind of discuss like it's still happening, but we just can't see it. It's so romantic. And she has this moment where she says, I thought about asking me if I'd ever been in love. It's a weird phrase in English, in love, like it's a sea you drown in or a town you live in. You don't get to be in anything else, in friendship or in anger or in hope. All you can be is in love. And I wanted to tell him that even though I'd never been in love, I knew what it was like to be in a feeling, to be not just surrounded by it, but also permeated by it, the way my grandmother talked about God being everywhere. When my thoughts spiraled, I was in the spiral and of it. And I wanted to tell him that the idea of being in a feeling gave language to something I couldn't describe before, created a form for it, but I couldn't figure out how to say any of that out loud. So, what's so cool about being inside our narrator is that no one on the outside ever gets to hear this. She just said, I can't figure out how to say any of that out loud. So, the privilege is ours, right? To get to know this really poetic and gorgeous side of how our character feels, how our character feels, and her closeness to certain emotions, and that she feels in them and of them and into the spiral. And this image of a spiral is going to come up multiple times throughout the passage too. So that's another good reason to kind of highlight it and talk about it. But this is just, like I said, by itself, you could do a lot with this on its own. But we have stream of consciousness here. We have a vulnerability that she's willing to express as the narrator, right? Like we get to hear that she's got this really vulnerable side, but no one else really knows this about her at this point, right? This is very, very intimate. And as in terms of characterization, right? We know that she's a private person. We know that she's a deep and thoughtful person. We know that she is deeply connected to the emotions she feels, but also struggles, right, to outwardly show that and share that with others. And then they move into this beautiful beginning of kind of the extended metaphor. They talk about the poem, The Second Coming, and there's this section about the turning and turning in the widening gyre. And this is an extension of this idea of a spiral. And her comment is this. She says, but the really scary thing is not turning and turning the widening gyre, it's turning and turning in the tightening gyre. It's getting sucked into a whirlpool that shrinks and shrinks and shrinks your world until you're just spinning without moving, stuck inside a prison cell that's exactly the size of you, until eventually you realize that you're not actually in a prison cell. You are the prison cell. That comment was out loud, right? So the first one was in her head. The panic, right? Like this comment about love and emotion and, a positive emotion, remembering her grandmother, that was all inside. This panic and fear, she does express outwardly. She says this to Davis, which is really cool. And I highlighted this because I really thought that would be helpful for us in discussing this character and the metaphor of what she's experiencing in her life. Okay, so let's keep on rolling here. I went a little too far. Okay, so he suggests that she should write her own response. And then we start to get closer to the romantic part of the scene, which doesn't have to be weird. Okay, we can talk about teenage romance. We do it in Romeo and Juliet. We do it in lots of other places. Doing it in YA is not any different. In fact, although it might on the surface feel a little cringy or maybe even a little awkward, it's so real and so much a part of the everyday living experience of our students. So, the first example we have of juxtaposition is when they actually go in for that first kiss, right? Oh, sorry, the second round, right? They have their first kiss, like right about here, and then she goes in for another one. He's giving her examples of poems, and so she says, I felt my chest tighten, his cold lips and warm mouth, his hands pulling me closer to him through the layers of our coats. So you will see other examples of this conflicting temperatures and conflicting feelings she's having during this like romantic period of her life, right? Cold lips, warm mouth. I liked making out with so many layers on. Our breathing steamed up his glasses as we kissed, and he tried to take them off, but I pressed them up against the bridge of his nose, and we were laughing together. And then he started kissing my neck, and I thought a thought occurred to me. His tongue had been in my mouth. Okay, so again, I know that we're like on the brink of having a really weird moment with our students. However, I want you to stay with me and see what happens next, right? His tongue had been in her mouth. All right. We can just call it out, right? They're kissing. It's fine. But here's where we get to see some of the struggles of our narrator with her inner life. I told myself to be in this moment, to let myself feel his warmth on my skin, but now his tongue was on my neck, wet and alive and microbial, and his hand was sneaking under my jacket, his cold fingers against my bare skin, right? We got the warmth and the cold, but also the stream of consciousness going on. And now things are going to get a little bit unhinged for her. It's fine. You're fine. Just kiss him. You need to check something. It's fine. Just be effing normal. Check to see if his microbes stay in you. Billions of people kiss and don't die. Just make sure his microbes aren't going to permanently colonize you. Come on, please stop this. He could have been Campylobacter. Oh my gosh, I don't even know this word. Campylobacter. He could be a non-symptomatic E. coli carrier that get that. You need antibiotics, and then you're going to need to get a C. diff, and a boom, dead in 4 days. Please effing just stop. Kiss him. Just check to make sure. I pulled away. You okay? He asked. I nodded. I need a little air. I sat up, turned away from him, pulled out my phone, and searched. Do bacteria of people you kiss stay inside your body? And quickly scrolled through a couple of pseudoscience results before getting to the one actual study done on the subject. Around 80 million microbes are exchanged on average per kiss. And after a 6-month follow-up, human gut microbiomes appear to be modestly but consistently altered. His bacteria would be in me forever. 80 million of them breeding and growing and joining my bacteria and producing God knows what. I felt his hand on my shoulder. I spun around and squirmed away from him. My breath running away from me. Dots in my vision. You're fine. He's not even the first boy you've kissed. 80 million organisms in me forever. Calm down. Permanently altering the microbiome. This is not rational. You need to do something. Please. There is a fix here. Please get to a bathroom. What's wrong? Nothing. I just need to use the restroom. Okay, so this is a great place to pause. Again, like if you need to condense this passage, you could just be doing this section. The elimination, right? We have this like beautiful, right, moment here, stream of consciousness, love, spiraling. I was in feelings, right? She's so thoughtful. And now something has happened, right? They have kissed and she is freaked completely out about the exchange of germs and bacteria that has happened in this moment. But we know that she wants to feel the warmth on her skin. She really likes this guy. She really enjoys, right, spending time with him. She loves his poetry. But we also know that she's very scared of what the tightening Yair can do to her. And this is where we see her getting tightened. She's getting consumed. The spiral, right? She's chasing that spiral. She's in it and she cannot break free. The only way that she's able to break out of this is, and you'll see, is that she kind of does like a little self-mutilation, right? She has a cut and that she but she sanitizes it to kind of feel that pain somewhere else. And so that's what's happening in this moment. And we're getting to see that in the breakdown of her syntax. And that's incredibly powerful for students to see that direct connection between syntax and a character shift or a character insight. So we have more here, right? There's more juxtaposition. I was cold, but started to sweat anyway. I didn't want to run, but every second counted. She needed to get to a bathroom, and then she goes there, right? I didn't want his microbiota near me, but I let him keep his arm there because I didn't want to seem like a freak. So she's got like the juxtaposition too of like the inner, outer, the temperatures, all that going on. I feel, oh my gosh, I just break my heart for this girl. And then finally, at the end, she talks to him about this tightening Yair. She says, kissing is not the problem. It's me. I'm the problem. She says, I have these thought spirals and I can't get out of them, turning and turning in the tightening Yair. And she says, this, like, it doesn't get better. You should know that. So as she's entering a new relationship, a new romantic relationship, she's immediately faced with the fact that she has to disclose and talk about her struggles. Even though at the beginning of any new relationship, all we want to do is pretend like we're perfect. We want to pretend like we've got it all together. We want to pretend to be the person that we think that other person sees. And being raw and vulnerable is a very difficult thing to do right out the get-go. So we're getting so much about this character from just this one passage. And I think that that's something your students will really appreciate and have a lot to say. I feel like my conversation was just as stream of consciousness as our main characters. But I hope you found that helpful and you enjoyed getting a chance to slow down and look at these different components of inner dialogue and the way that characters are revealed in that way. Please let me know in the comments who and what you would pair this with, what other characters in literature you think we could have a similar conversation about, or maybe even contrasting conversations. Where do you see the power of this passage coming into a unit that you teach right now? I would love to hear and talk to you more about this in the comments on any of the videos in this series, and we will talk soon. Have a great day.